Well, all started in conversation with other members of the Neuroscience and Mental Health Institutes, colleagues. We were trying to figure out how to make science more approachable and at the same time understand better what we are working for.
Communities are like the nervous system because they connect in different ways, the way neurons do, and that's so important.
We had the idea to try and connect the people through art.
We thought it might be possible to bring inspiration to what we do, to persons with lived experience, to the field, in this very novel way of connecting the two areas.
And then we were astounded by how many submissions we had, like I think close to sort of 80 submissions, and they were all of such high quality.
It's a new approach in the way we're connecting with the wider community. We've had outreach events and presentations, but they're often one way. I think this will be a very interesting interaction between the people coming to see the art and it may resonate with people.
I'm a true believer of the power of human connections. And together, these can lead to hope for people with neurological and mental health problems.
It should also be about love. Love for ourselves, love for each other, and love for the connections.
Now, our journey is yours. I invite you to join us and to experience connections.
The brain is beautiful. We can see it in so many different new ways, and by seeing it, research can find ways to heal in a very practical way the brain. So that's beautiful that we can do that.
MRI stands for magnetic resonance imaging, and it's a medical imaging technology that can take pictures of the inside of the human body. We're watching the motion of water molecules, and it moves faster along the wires, along the connections. So we have a big focus on developing the technology to now measure things that you couldn't measure before in a healthy human.
I personally love the connections of the brain because it's different parts that are interacting with each other in such unique and indescribable ways. I just think it's so incredibly cool that we're able to see cells and what they're doing in the brain. There's so much more to learn, and I think it's so unique and interesting to look at all these connections, both visually in terms of the images that we can create, but also in terms of what these different parts of the brain are doing.
You and I do not exist in isolation. We are communicating. The cells in the brain communicate with each other, and we intercept those signals that they pass on to each other. And so now we're developing drugs based on these fundamental discoveries. And so I think the beauty of science, and neuroscience in particular, is that while we tend to study a specific disorder, we actually can hopefully make it available and useful for a larger population of people who are affected by different neurological conditions.
In research or in neuroscience in general, you come to appreciate these connections a lot. My painting was inspired by my passion for the brain in general. It's also representing these connections between the physician or healthcare workers in general with the patient. I learned that having such a deep connections with the patients or the clients that you're seeing is way more important than just looking at the disease.
The second section on what it is to live with these neurological disorders, like we can find ways of expressing. There's hope in that. And I found that's the section I find really fascinating, just aesthetically, that there are some very visual repetitions or kind of features in it. There's a lot of fragmentation in the foreground, which I find that really fascinating, that it's such a repeated motif. And a lot of layering as well, which I also really interesting, that it's something, if you look at the collection as a whole, that those things are like fragmentation and layering. So what does that tell us about what it is to experience, to live with this?
When I see an octopus's arms folding, I think of the intricate folds and grooves in the brain. Each arm operates independently, yet they're interconnected, working towards a common goal. Just like how different regions of our brain communicate to perform various functions, to me, the octopus is a perfect metaphor for our own neural networks. For many who identify as neurodivergent, life can feel like being an octopus out of water. We navigate a world that often doesn't seem designed for us, where even simple tasks can feel monumental.
I've dealt with anxiety and social anxiety in particular for my entire life. That feeling of disconnect kind of started very early on, and definitely has led and manifested into my artwork because, all of the moments that I'm capturing in those images are lonely experiences. You can have one thing happen today that just tipped you over, but really it's all the other stuff, or it's just the brain chemicals not doing their job.
I've lived with bipolar disorder for the past, 15 years, I guess, diagnosed, but really probably 20 years or so. In June 2017, I just had a brutal episode. It was sort of like these tectonic plates locked and then they released. Explosion, disintegration, nuclear reaction, running out of control. And it was all this chaos. And then it sort of peaked in just sheer exhaustion and pain.
My sister, who was studying to become a hospital chaplain, also was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. To be diagnosed with a lifelong chronic debilitating illness, it felt like such a big moment in her life. I feel that often in our culture, talking about disease, illness is a bit taboo. We kind of have that formal disconnect from the things that are really impacting us.
3 years ago, I had AVM stroke in my brain. And with that, there is malformation of my artery in my brain that was never found before. I had to relearn all the language. There was no language when I come back. I can't even order a water from my nurse. I was really thirsty, but that was like at least for months that it was really difficult for me to do that. I think that is why the visual art is important to that point, is that connection is being made within that. And it's only within that only. And that's the true power of visual art.
I work with people who have acquired communication disorders such as aphasia or alexia. Most often it can be a result of a stroke, but often I see individuals who have had traumatic brain injuries or things like tumors or gunshot wounds that can impact brain functioning. Areas that are important in the brain are typically in the left hemisphere. And so when somebody has a stroke that affects certain areas that are important for speaking and understanding and reading and writing, you can lose those abilities. What we are learning through research about how the brain responds to certain treatments, certain things that we can do to enhance the plasticity of the brain, all of that we can apply in the clinical setting in order to really result in better outcomes for people.
The final section about healing and community, I find that so wonderful, like that it's, again, repeated in so many of the submissions, that it's about being supported by a loved one, being supported by a community, or being supported by the creation of artwork, like finding that you're not alone and that there are other ways, that we can break this societal system of always having to be like working and fast, that we can find ways to live well with brain diseases and neurological disorders.
Alzheimer's disease has many facets to it in terms of the disconnections within the brain. We were able to embark on a project to develop small molecule drugs that we have developed to clinical trials and hopefully help our patients. So our goal is to replace that despondency and despair with hope through some of the things that we are doing, and hopefully move this to clinical trials and alleviate the suffering of our patients.
Recently, I've become interested on the effects of social isolation on the brain. We started modeling that in our fruit flies, and we were actually really shocked because When we isolate the flies, our animals end up behaving abnormally in almost every single behavioral paradigm that we've tested them on. Depending on what the behavioral problems are, I certainly do think that either establishing connections or reconnecting with your social network would definitely help.
Art can change you physiologically, change your body chemistry, and that can contribute to healing. When most people think about medicine and healing, you're kind of always thinking about like one patient and their healing journey as an individual. But I think through what I've learned, it really is essential to have like a community behind you. Art can break down hospital walls and bring everyone to a path to colorful healing.
Kanche Zan Cunningham Dishnika Shun Michif Nia. So I introduced myself in Michif, which is a traditional language of the Métis people. It's an endangered language. There's about 600 fluent speakers left in Canada. When I was like really diving deep into reconnecting to culture, I started beading. It is the traditional art form of the Métis people. We're also known as the flower beadwork people. And for me, it was a way to also connect to my ancestors. The beautiful thing about connection is that there's no one way to connect. Once you find the people that get you, you're able to establish that and really build a sense of community, and that every person is a unique, magical person.
I am an art therapist, and mostly I work with trauma, grief and loss, neurodiversity. I probably have thousands of these drawings. And then when I saw this, I was like, okay, this is somewhere where I can showcase what it's like to take notes in a very different way. There's so much research that can be done, and I really wish, and this is what I would really love to advocate for, is actually including the people with lived experience. Going forward, I think art really needs to be included in research, because this is where we get the creativity. This is where we get the think outside the box, and maybe this could work, and get different people working together. So you can have all of the research and you can have the art, and we need to have them connected and together, otherwise we don't have the healing.
At the heart of Connections is the belief that neuroscience and mental health research is more than the development of treatments and medical paths to healing. We need shared experiences, community building, and understanding one another across all humanity. Let's keep pushing the boundaries of both neuroscience and explore it in all its fashion.